Hi Patterson Library friends, this is Miss Amy. Even though we can't be together, we are together virtually, which is great because it's so good to know that we're going to share some stories together this summer. Our theme for the whole summer is Imagine Your Story. We'll be talking about fairy tales and folk tales and imaginary creatures, and we'll be using our imaginations a lot while we share stories together. Today, my mighty Munchkin group is going to be doing all sorts of stories about littles. Little things like fairies and elves and gnomes and all sorts of littles. So get ready to use your imagination, and we're going to start with a song. This is one you all know, so I hope you'll sing it with me from home. The more we get together, 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 the more we get together, the happier we'll be. For your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be. So let's hear a story together. My first story today is called Gnome, 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 about a naughty little gnome in a garden. It's written by Ashlyn Anstey. You know I like to look at the end pages, and this end page is covered with all sorts of garden things, as well as some little gnomes. Gnome. The students at Green Thumb Elementary had been working hard on their garden all year long. Finally, it was almost ready to harvest. Everyone was excited, especially Gnome. As the students headed outside, Mr. Waters assigned each of them a task. The kids quickly got to work. Uh-oh. Let me make sure I have the right page. At first, Gnome was very helpful, but then No, Gnome! He got a little carried away. Mr. Waters suggested that Gnome try something else. He's watering the plants, but pretty soon, No, Gnome! Mr. Waters gave Gnome one last chance. All Gnome had to do was stand still and hold the basket for the garden clippings. Do you think he can do that? Gnome didn't even last 1 minute. He's here and there and everywhere. Mr. Waters sent Gnome back into the classroom. When the other kids returned, no one said hello. At recess, no one would play with him. And at the end of the day, no one even said goodbye. Gnome was blue. How could he show his friends that he was sorry? So he snuck in early. Look at all the things he's working on. The next day, Gnome couldn't wait to get back to the garden. The other kids were dreading it. But when they went outside, oh, Gnome! The garden was beautiful and ready for harvest. So some of you may have planted a garden at home, and I'll bet you're working hard pulling weeds and making sure everything is ready. And I'm sure you're behaving lots better than Gnome did in that story. Now I have a fairy poem. You'll recognize the words a little bit because it sort of sounds like a poem you know about 5 little monkeys. But these are 5 little fairies. Can you count them with me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 little fairies playing by the pond. One fell in and lost her wand. Mama called the wizard who did respond. Now 4 little fairies are playing by the pond. 4 little fairies playing by the pond. One fell in and she lost her wand. Mama called the wizard who did respond. Now 3 little fairies are playing by the pond. 3 little fairies are playing by the pond. One fell in and lost her wand. Mama called the wizard who did respond. Now two little fairies are playing by the pond. Two little fairies playing by the pond. One fell in and lost her wand. Mama called the wizard who did respond. Now one little fairy is playing by the pond. One little fairy playing by the pond. She fell in and she lost her wand. Mama called the wizard and he did respond. Now 5 little fairies are back at the pond. So after next week, I'll be sending home a little bag and I'll put that fairy poem in it. And you might be able to use your fingers or make some little fairies at home. You'll get a bag week 2 and week 4 with words to some of our songs and lists of some of our books and some other fun little prizes for you. Also, you can log in starting this week and put down how many minutes you're reading when you're reading at home. After you read 300 minutes, 600 minutes, and 900 minutes, we'll let you know that you can come up and pick a prize at Patterson Library. Mondays at 11:15, there'll be some special events each week. And starting next week, after the special event, I'll be pulling names of children who have completed raffles on the Read Squared program, completed missions on the Read Squared program, in a raffle drawing. So we'll have some prizes for that. Now I'm going to share a story with you called Fairy Houses, because I'm going to do a separate YouTube link to a fairy house demonstration, and we'll be making some fairy houses together and giving you some ideas. Fairy Houses by Tracy Kane. This summer, my parents decided we should leave the city and spend a week on a small island in Maine. They said there was something special for me on the island, something I would really like, but they wouldn't tell me what it was until we got there. As soon as we got off the boat, I guessed, is it the lighthouse? No. Is it those little sandpipers on the beach? The seals? Our cottage? But later when we went for a walk in the woods by the cottage, I discovered the secret my parents had been keeping. We came upon an area in the woods where there was a sign. You may build houses, small and hidden for the fairies. Do not use only living items, no artificial materials. Fairy houses. People had built small fairy houses for the fairies to live in. I asked if I could build a fairy house. My father said yes, as long as I follow the rules. I scouted out places that would be just right for a fairy. I chose a hollow at the base of an oak tree. I used twigs and leaves and pieces of bark, and I finished my fairy house. I hoped my fairies would choose my house for a place to live. The next morning, I couldn't wait to visit. I bent down to look. I heard a little chirping. Chirp, chirp. Was it a fairy snoring? Hey, you're not a fairy, I said. You're a cricket. The cricket hopped off. Maybe the fairies would like something to eat, I thought. So I gathered some berries and I sprinkled them around my house. The following day, after visiting the lighthouse with my parents, I decided to check on my fairy house. A pair of finches were flying off with the last of my berries. Then I saw a little stream. The sound of trickling water gave me another idea. I took some stones from my pack and I arranged them in a circle near my fairy house, and I filled the circle with water in case the fairies got thirsty. The next day I went again. Anyone here? I whispered. The house looked empty, but then I spied someone sitting in the pool. I wanted to get a closer look at the frog, but as soon as I got close, he leaped away. I needed to do some home improvements on my fairy garden. The next afternoon, I saw squirrels nibbling on the nuts I had put in, but no fairies in sight. I couldn't give up. I still hoped the fairies would visit my house, so I made a beautiful entrance with seashells and feathers that we had found on the beach. I decorated the path leading up to the door. The next morning, I got up very early when my parents were still asleep. I tiptoed out of our cottage and went into the woods. This was the day that we would be leaving the island. It was the last chance to see if there were fairies there. A fog had rolled in off the ocean. I could barely see. It was like walking in a cloud. The trees seemed huge and their branches looked like arms. Goosebumps started popping up on my arms and legs. Someone was watching me, I was sure. Should I turn around? My fairy house was so close. It was then I heard footsteps, and I saw a shape moving toward my fairy house. My heart started thumping. I jumped behind a tree to hide. I caught my breath. It was a deer licking the salty seashells. I stood perfectly still as she made her way lazily through the woods, then vanished into the mist. Exhausted, I lay down near my fairy house, watching, waiting, and wishing for fairies to appear. The quiet of the woods and the soft mist made me sleepy. My eyelids felt heavy. I tried not to fall asleep. Before long, the sun started breaking through the mist, and with it came a soft breeze. Kristen, the breeze seemed to whisper in my ear, Kristen, wake up. We can only stay a moment. Struggling to open my eyes, I saw a bright beam of light and a tiny smiling face. We are the fairies who live in the spirits of all the plants and animals in the woods, a voice said. Of all the houses here, the animals have chosen yours to visit. You have treated the woods with care and respect. Look quickly, Kristen. This is a moment of magic when the fairies will show themselves as a way for thanking you. As the late morning sun started breaking through the mist, light beams illuminated the fairies. They sparkled like jewels. They became so bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened my eyes, the fairies had changed into beautiful monarch butterflies. Butterflies fluttered around me like a great orange cloud, following me to the edge of the woods where the sun shone brightly. I watched them dancing toward the light, higher and higher. Squinting into the golden day, I smiled and waved as the last butterfly disappeared into the sky. Now when I turn the page, we'll see some ideas about building your own fairy houses. You could build a house in the spring using branches and pine needles and leaves that were left from the fall. In the summer, you might find some rocks and if you're near the beach, you could get rocks and shells, maybe some feathers. In the fall, you can use some dried Queen Anne's lace and other flowers, milkweed pods. And even in the winter, you can make a delightful fairy house. Now, when I do a fairy house, sometimes I use an indoor fairy house. Sometimes we do an outdoor fairy house. So we'll be talking about that in our separate video. Before I leave, we're going to quickly go on an elf hunt. I brought my binoculars today. You can pretend you've got yours, and we're going to go on an elf hunt together. We're going on an elf hunt. I've got my binoculars. I am so excited. Look at that grass. It is so tall. Can't go under it. Can't go over it. I guess we'll have to go through it. Swish, 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 swish. Help me go through the grass. Going on an elf hunt. Got my binoculars. I am so excited. Uh-oh, look! It's a river. Can't go over it. Can't go under it. Guess we'll have to swim. Splash, 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 splash. Hope you're splashing through the river with me. Oh, we're out on the other side. Going on an elf hunt. I've got my binoculars. I'm so excited. Oh, lots of mud. Can't go over it. Can't go under it. We'll have to squish right through it. Squish. Scrape that mud off your shoes. We're going on an elf hunt. I've got my binoculars. I'm so excited. Oh, look! It's a cottage. It's a tiny cottage. Let's knock on the door. Is anyone home? I see a hat in the window. Hello, Mr. Elf. May we have some tea? We're going to see a friend. I've got cookies. My elf has tea. Let's have a tea party. The end. You can use your imagination at home. Go on an elf hunt or a fairy hunt. Maybe have a tea party with one of those littles. It's been so fun sharing some imagination things with you today. I hope you're having a lot of fun this summer. So watch for the link for the fairy houses. It'll be up on YouTube soon. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next week.